Well, thank you all for taking the time out of your schedules to join us to
Yeah,
find out how
absolutely.
to start a six-figure nonprofit and get paid for it.
Bingo.
Come on. So many good causes out there. So many people are doing good work, but and they dream about running an organization that they get paid for. And guess what? I want to introduce you guys to my friend Tim here, who actually runs a six-figure nonprofit and gets paid to do it.
Yeah. Wouldn't you know? Yeah.
Yay. That's so
Yeah.
good. All right. Well, hey, if I hope this is what you're coming here to learn because
Yep.
that's what we're going to be talking
That's
about.
what we're
So
going to be talking about.
that's what we're talking about. So, okay. All right. Here's what you're going to learn during our time together. We're going to talk about setting up a solid foundation for your
Yeah.
nonprofit success.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking through building a financial plan that supports your vision. We're going to be
Yeah.
talking about creating a fundraising strategy that brings in real results and how you can get paid as a
Yeah.
nonprofit founder. Sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan. Let's do it.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Well, here's what just one of our students shared with us. We're going to be sharing several testimonials because I think it's helpful to hear what other people are doing and just the impact that's happening. So, this is what one of my actual one-on-one students had shared with me. He said, "Thank you so much for all you're doing to help my wife and I move forward. I
Mm.
officially resigned and only have 9 days left as an employee. After 13 years, I finally get to run my nonprofit full time." Can I get an amen in the chat for that?
A
Like
to the men.
13 years of running a ministry and organization. Both him and his wife have been running this. They've been investing so much, traveling internationally, doing it while working full time. Finally, he reached out to me and was just like, "Hey, Mary, can you help me? I really feel like I need to be doing this full time." And by the way, he loved his job. A lot of times people who run organizations, or run these nonprofits, they usually are an extension of the work that they're already doing. So it's like they love the work. Kayla, who's on the call, she's a nurse. She loves, I would assume, loves being a nurse, but also wants to use that platform to make a difference through her organization, Butterfly Kisses Alliance. So it's the same thing for, I'm sure, many of you guys here. So we just don't want you to wait. Okay. We don't want you to wait 13 years to actually get paid and to do it full time when you feel like you're called to do it full time. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I'm Mary Valloni, for those of you I don't know. And this is Tim Needham.
Hello.
Hello. Tim, will you share with us a little bit about you?
Yeah, I'm a U.S. Navy veteran from a long time ago. Won't get into that, but I'm a veteran. I'm just somebody who's always had a passion and a heart to serve people. I just love people. But interestingly, I'm an introvert. I'm an introvert just has learned how to love people. But my background is in I was a youth pastor for several years, and as that passion for young people grew and became more organic, started doing social work for a few years and saw that there was a niche and a need to serve a certain type of demographic in the city of St. Louis that I wanted to better serve. And so over 10 years ago, started working on the ideas for what would eventually become Restoration House STL. As you can see on the bottom of the screen there, our little awesome logo that we created so many years ago. So the last 10 years, I've ran Restoration House as the founder. I am a co-founder, but one of the founders, and I serve as the executive director. So I run the entire organization, and I've done that from day one. But over the last couple of years, I've also had a new passion in my heart to really help train up new leaders. And so when I'm not running Restoration House, I coach people on how to start nonprofits.
Yeah. So
So that's
cool.
my story.
Yes. Well, and Tim's over there on the right, if you can't see, leading our recent workshop a couple weeks ago where we had our students come in from all across the country to join us and to just take their organizations to the next level. I'm pictured on the left. This is a picture of me training some ministry friends, missionary friends that I've been doing this for 10 years now. And for the previous 10 years, so for the last 2 decades, I've been raising funds for large scale organizations like Special Olympics, the ALS Association, American Cancer Society. And then 10 years ago, I lost my dad to cancer while I was working for the Cancer Society. And in that moment, I was kind of like, okay, well, if I could help anyone raise money, who would I help? And I really felt a calling to help ministries, missionaries, and nonprofit startups like you guys to do the work that you're called to do. And so I ended up working with Chi Alpha Campus Ministries. I love that our friend Savo is on, or my friend Savo is on and Christina are on the call today. But just being able to work with ministries like that, I worked with them for 5 years, really got my feet wet in understanding more about just the desires of people wanting to start their own nonprofits, but also
Yeah.
people who wanted to be more entrepreneurial. And this
Yeah.
is a term that you and I use quite a bit, is that we love the nonprofit entrepreneur.
That's
You
right.
guys are not employees. Like, it's like you cannot be constrained. You're visionaries. You see a problem and you want to solve the problem. And so that's really where we love to just come alongside you and help you move that vision forward and to bring around the right people and to see that, this endeavor, this entrepreneurial endeavor, although nonprofit, come, really to fruition.
Yeah, I just get so excited when I hear that term nonprofit entrepreneur. And it's not tossed around enough. I mean, we hear about people starting for-profit businesses, and those are great. You and I, we have for-profit businesses. We're entrepreneurs in that aspect. But doggone it, we should celebrate nonprofit entrepreneurs just as much, and we should give them that term because we and everybody who's on this call deserve to be like celebrated for that because you're not doing it for the money, that's for sure.
That's for
So
sure.
so you should be celebrated for all the impact that you're going to create within your organizations.
Absolutely.
Now,
Absolutely.
every
Well,
one of you all should give an amen to that.
yeah, give an amen. Love it. Hey, I want to introduce you guys to a friend of both Tim and I's. This is Emily Hauser, and if you have followed any of the work that I've done, that Tim and I have done together, I love using Emily's story. Number one, because she's dynamic. She let us interview her on our podcast. If you guys haven't listened to our podcast, it's called Start and Grow Your Nonprofit Podcast. And we've interviewed people like Emily and lots of other nonprofit entrepreneurs. But Emily was one of the first people that I got a chance, really first nonprofit entrepreneur that I got to work with. And this was a comment that she made to me. She said, fundraising gives me so much anxiety. I think she actually used the word angina. I didn't even know what that word meant, but I'm going to use anxiety for here. But she said, but I need to figure it out because I'm going to have to raise money for the rest of my life. And for those of you who are running a nonprofit organization or aspire to, fundraising can sometimes be the thing that holds you back because you're like, I don't want to ask people for money. I don't want to do it. And I just want to share with you that Emily had such a fear of raising funds. And this was about 8 years ago. And this is a picture of Emily and her partner at the time. After they purchased 94 acres of land. This land alone cost about $500,000 that she and her team raised.
Mhm.
And she recently stepped down from her organization, feeling called to move on to the next thing in life. And she handed over $1 million. Thank you, Nurse Kayla. Angina is chest pain. But Emily handed over $1 million to her
Yeah.
successor.
Yeah.
Come
Yeah.
on now. I mean, from somebody who had a fear and had chest pain from
Yeah.
an anxiety around raising funds to then really getting our arms wrapped around it and saying, like, I love people. I love being able to walk alongside them and giving them an opportunity to give so that they can transform lives. And so she has handed over this organization. I know, Tim, you know Emily well, and we both
Yeah.
are like just cheering that girl on in the next season of her life. But what an accomplishment.
Yeah. Yeah. I kinda had the luxury, I guess, of being somebody who walked that journey with, Emily. But I always say, like, she was tracking about a year ahead of me. in the progress. So she got it started about a year before. And so to see, yeah, I got to see almost every form of evolution of where she took the nonprofit, and just going from a scarcity mindset to a mindset of like, yeah, we're gonna go out and buy like a $500 plot of land, and we're expecting that it's going to happen. Just that shift of mindset was pretty awesome to watch throughout the years,
So
and
cool.
she's still dreaming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, and obviously her organization needed to be $1 million organization. So I want to introduce you to the leader of an organization who didn't need to run $1 million organization, but needed it to be a six-figure organization. I want to introduce you to my friend Tim. So, no, I did want to
Yeah.
highlight. Tim actually said this on a recent podcast. He said, "Mary and I run the Nonprofit Academy and the Start and Grow Your Nonprofit podcast together, but I still give Mary calls to ask her how to grow my fundraising. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be a brand new startup running a six-figure nonprofit or a $2 million nonprofit. You better have another rung above you because there's always room to grow."
Yeah.
And this came off of actually our episode that came out yesterday with Adina, who's on the call here. Adina and Mark sharing about their organization. I'll share a little bit more about them on today's episode, not like I'm recording a podcast, on today's call. But I just want you to see like what we're going to talk through this, how to start a six-figure nonprofit. We're going to use Tim and his organization as a model for you guys,
Yeah.
because I think it's so important to be able to see, hey, 8 years ago, Tim, 10 years ago, this organization was an idea. The Restoration House St. Louis was just a thought. It was like, hey, maybe I could make a difference in the lives of homeless youth in our community. But Tim hadn't done
And maybe I can
anything.
get paid to do it.
Yeah, and maybe, maybe you could get paid to do it. Exactly. So here's the question, like we're talking about, how do you start a six-figure nonprofit? Well, so many people, and I'm sure you as well, are thinking to yourself, like, I'd like to start a nonprofit, but a six-figure nonprofit seems very specific.
Yeah.
And the challenge is that I want you to like envision building a house. I know that like for me, I mean, we have been through some building of, we built 2 homes now. And in the process, I'm like, the blueprint that you put together is ultimately going to be what everybody else builds.
Yeah.
Once you have that blueprint created, everybody else just does their job. And most of the time when people start nonprofits, they don't start it because they're building, like they think that they're going to build this mansion of a nonprofit. They're just like, I'm just going to go help a few people.
Yeah.
And then that thing kind of takes off and you start thinking, oh my gosh, I could actually do this as a career. I could actually run this thing. And now it starts to get legs. At that point, you have to literally clear the foundation and build a new blueprint. And that's what we're here today to talk to you about is let's build a blueprint that has the space for 6 figures.
Yeah.
If
Because I
that's,
think that,
if that's what you're envisioning, go ahead.
yeah, at a minimum, like what the marker of being a six figure, what that allows you to do is at that point, it solves the question of whether you can do this as a, full time. Because if you're at that threshold, like the conversation should have already happened or should be happening about whether you're going to, use those funds to go full time. Now you may need to scale it to a larger point, and probably so, in this like this economy that we now live in. But the thing is, $100,000, you're having that conversation now if you haven't already, or if you haven't done it already, to be able to do this full time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the next question about how do you get paid? Once again, I've worked with 1,000 nonprofits at this point in my consulting work, 1,000 nonprofits. And when I talk to somebody who is not getting paid through their nonprofit, when I ask them, do you want to get paid? And they
Yeah.
say yes. And I say, do you have it in your budget?
Yeah.
And they say no. So like, I mean, it's a sheet of paper. It's free to put numbers on paper. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't cost anything to come up with a budget of, okay, if this is how much I want to get paid, or this is how much it's going to cost to run this organization, you got to put your salary into the budget and actually be intentional about doing it. Because I think sometimes people say, I'm going to build this, I'm going to get it going. And once it starts to raise enough money and we start to get to that point, then I'll start to take a salary and we'll go from there. But the problem is that many times people see, oh my gosh, the need is so great. I don't want to take that money. I need to
Yeah.
give that to the cause. The cause needs it so much more. And eventually you get into a place where one of my other clients, I mean, they're like a $1.5 million organization. The leaders, the founders of the organization are just now having conversations about getting paid. And it's hard because they've been running this organization. They've told all their volunteers, we are a volunteer-led organization. We are frugal. We don't spend money on staffing. And it's like, I want to make sure that everybody sees there is no corporation that is running successfully on a volunteer basis.
Yeah.
I mean, when you run an organization, when you're an entrepreneur, this is a business.
Yeah.
It
Well,
needs leadership that is compensated well to run it. So I
yeah.
just want to address that.
Everybody has to have a means to be able to support themselves. So there may be people out there who can run a nonprofit and be a volunteer, for it, but their means is coming from somewhere. So they may have that sustainability in some other aspect of their lives. But not everybody has that. Sometimes, I know there are people on this webinar right now who are single parents and single, and are the sole person, like, of income in their household. And so it's not practical, to run any kind of business that way, where, like, you're not taking an income. You have to be able to take care of yourself. And let me just speak to this and say this too. Like what you mentioned, Mary, there's a form of guilt that's out there. Like, should I be taking this money? And then should I be, taking a salary? Should I feel like guilty? And you shouldn't feel it. You shouldn't feel guilty about putting together a budget, like what you said, Mary, that is going to sustain you so that you can spend more time doing the work. So if you're not paying yourself, then you're really hurting the organization, because you have to find income somewhere. And if you have to find it someplace else, then you're not, that's time that you're not spending in the work, in the nonprofit, in the ministry. So the more you can, push yourself to become that full-time person, the more work you can do. The more work you can do, the bigger impact you can have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that there is a season to be learning, and then there's a season to step into that. I've been called to this. I'm supposed to be running this. This is a professional career. This is a professional job, just like any other entrepreneur that would be out there. So, all
Yeah.
right, let's dive in. So, the main thing that Tim and I teach to start up nonprofits is that we have a 5-step plan. Super easy, spells out the word START. For those of you who follow my fundraising freedom steps, I love a good acronym. Okay. So freedom, I love teaching my freedom steps for fundraising, but for the sake of starting up a nonprofit and getting it to a 6-figure income where you actually get paid, these are the 5 steps that Tim and I teach.
Yeah.
1, S is storytelling. T, team building. A, action plan. R, raising funds. And T, tell the world. And Tim, I mean, like, this is pretty much the journey that your organization went on
Yeah.
years ago and continue to go on every single year as an organization.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
we knew from the get-go, just looking at that first slide there with the
Yeah.
storytelling, we knew that everything had to start around the vision, but we had to find a way to craft that vision into being able to tell a story that of why we need to exist, and what we can do to help, and how we're going to impact the community. So as you say all the time, Mary, if you can't tell a good story about your organization, then you need to figure out how to tell. You need to figure out what your story is.
Yeah.
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 And Tim, you, when you first got started, I know I was in the journey with you because I was helping
Yeah.
you with your fundraising efforts. But
Yeah.
Darion was somebody that you guys anchored, like the
Yeah. That's
story
right.
of his journey was something that you anchored your organization on. And I think that it's important for everyone who's on here to have one person or one story that
Yeah.
is like, hey, I tell this story all the time. And so would you tell us about the story you share about Darion?
Yeah, so Darion was a young man who, uh, long before Restoration House began, I was working with at the organization I was at previously. But this is a young guy. This is the compelling part. So this is the young guy who he was involved in gang life. When I met him, his street name was Teardrop. But if you got to know him well enough, he'd finally tell you my name's Darion. Darion was a young man who grew up in the streets of St. Louis. His mom was uh, she was one who was sex trafficked, but she also trafficked other young girls. And so him and I would have conversations all the time. And I will say this, Darian and I, when we first met, we butt heads all the time. We did not like each other. But the more I got to know this kid, the more I just wanted to just love him to pieces. And I'm like, I'm determined to get you to like me, and we're gonna like each other, and we're just gonna figure this out. And it did, you know, through perseverance and through a lot of love. He began opening up to me, but he would tell stories to me about what it was like for him growing up. He was in this picture you see, he was probably 19 years old, but just imagine being a 10 years younger version of him at the age of 9, and you grew up in a house where there were young girls who were literally, they were literally attached to a pole in the basement of their house, and they were sex slaves. They were young girls who were being trafficked, and he grew up in this type of an environment as his norm, right? But then, I continue to talk to him, and I hear more. I'm like, I see the potential in this young guy, even through all the trauma that he had been through. I see the potential in this guy. He's a leader by nature. Everybody wanted to follow him. But I say, buddy, you're such a natural born leader. Like, why don't you consider going back to school? And he's like, why do I need to go back to school? Literally, everybody in my life dies before the age of 30. And I would when the first time he told me that, I sat back and thought about it for a second. I'm like, "No. Okay, you're full of it. You're exaggerating." And as I thought through that, I realized he's telling the truth. Everybody in his life dies before the age of 30. So he's living without hope.
Mhm.
So what we needed to become was a place, an organization where people could find hope, where people could live beyond the age of 30, where not only they're living beyond the age, but they have purpose and hope and a plan for their life. So we built Restoration House around the story of Darion, is that we are serving a demographic of young people who feel like there is no hope, who actually know, based on the history of the people in their lives, that they're probably not going to make it to the age of 30 unless we get involved and unless we come in. And so Darion for us was that first story to say, um, this is why we exist. Now, you fast forward, we made it our mission to serve this young man because we were a very young organization coming right out of the gate. We wanted to be able to show that what we're doing works. And when you fast forward about a year into Restoration House, and our growth, he went from being a young man who was on the streets and without hope to a young man who began finding community and surrounding himself with people who are lifting him up, building him up, and that community helped get him a job. That community helped getting him an apartment, get him off the streets. That community, I know because we have a lot of believers and people of faith in this room, um, shared the gospel to him, and he found his hope, and that hope existed in Jesus. All those things that we wanted to make Restoration House become, he was experiencing and eventually did experience. So
Mm.
that was our first successful story, and it's a story that we still tell today. Now, as I reflect back, I get to share it like, look how far we've come. This is the first, but this is the first of many, many young people that we have helped throughout the years.
Yeah. And PS, Tim, how many people have you guys helped? Just the
Yeah,
numbers that you share.
over the
Yeah.
last 3 years, we've been able to provide, services to over 4,000 young adults between the ages of 18 and 26 over the last 3 years. Yeah.
Can we get a
Yeah.
an amen, high five? Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, just like thumbs up.
And the
Yeah.
totality of it, we've reached, somewhere over, like, 14,000 between, in the time that we started and now, but within the last 3 years, we've served over 4,000 18 and
Yeah.
26-year-olds.
So good. Okay, would you guys just for a second, in the chat, would you share the name of one person? Like, obviously, don't give us their full name. You can give a different name if you need to, but who's the story that you can tell, like about your organization? Who's your
Yeah,
Darion?
yeah,
Like, what story can you share? Is it the blank family? Is it this this 7-year-old,
yeah,
this whatever? Yep, Joan,
love it,
Karen.
yeah.
Exactly, Charlotte, Brett.
Who's the
One,
why behind your what?
exactly.
Yeah,
And we want to challenge you to one story
yeah,
because we can look at how you guys could get can you feel like an emotional understanding of Darion's story? Like for me, when Tim and I connected, it was like I couldn't remember Darion's name, but I was like, that one kid that you always talk about that said he couldn't live to the age of 30. Okay, I'm somebody who, I live part-time in Mexico and part-time in St. Louis, but I lived on the divide of the city. Like I lived on like one side is the wealthiest and the other side is the poorest. And when Tim's telling me this story about Darion, I was like, oh my gosh, like Darion probably only lives 5 minutes
yeah.
from my house.
That's not
And
an exaggeration, actually. Yeah,
no, no, not at all. That's what I was like. I mean, North County was like right behind, like is right there. And so I'm thinking to myself, here's a kid with women in his basement and then I'm trying to figure out how did these young people get on the streets? And so then my mind's like, then I'm asking more questions. I'm like, Tim, why are people on the streets? And Tim's like, they couch hop, like Darion left his house as soon as he could, as soon as he
yeah,
was old enough to get out of the house, he left. And then he
yeah.
couch hopped and he couch
Yeah,
hopped until he ran the course of the couches that would take him in.
that's
And then
right.
eventually he landed himself on the streets.
That's right.
And that's how he made his way to Restoration House and how he got, into their resources. And so that's where I was just like, oh my gosh, I, honestly was clueless living in the community, not understanding what somebody like this might be going through. It's not because he didn't want to get a job or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
the circumstances. So anyways, for your sake, I just want you guys to have your story of like, who is your person exactly? Bob. Yep. Bob and Lloyd, your founder story. Perfect.
Yeah,
Love
and
that.
I wanna emphasize, so one story to begin with, that's what you anchor and lean on. As you grow and as you begin to expand, like, all your resources, those stories begin to increase, so you should you're not always gonna use this, you know? In fact, and to be honest, the story of Darion now, usually use within the context of these conversations, but now what I wanna do is I wanna share, like, stories of the things that we're doing now, you know? So for you guys right now, this is who you're working with right now. This is the story that you should be telling everybody and learn to craft it really well. So like my wife always told me, she's like, Tim, here's what you need to do. You need to like tell that story, but you need to stand in front of a mirror and you need to tell yourself that story, you know? But you got to the point is you got to get really good at telling that story really well. You have to find a way to craft it that to where like honestly what Mary said, I shared that story with her and Mary's like, okay, how can I get involved? I need to be able to be a part of helping this young man Darion, you know?
Yes. Well, and you also then from there, I'm like, okay, there's kids on the corner of the street. What should I do with them? And like you became my expert Like it was my resource to understanding the community, because I'm just going to let you know, I was raised in a small town. I never saw homeless people. I mean, like I never saw homeless people. I moved to St. Louis and my husband's like, don't talk to everybody. Like I was just like, what? We're not saying hi to everybody? Like they're not
Yeah.
friends? Like it just, I mean, they're just, it's a whole nother demographic and a whole like systemic thing that, you know, Tim obviously is more educated on. And same thing for your thing, whatever your thing is, you are the expert in that space. You know, for my friends that work in, you know, college ministry, I'm like, I don't understand college suicide. I don't understand, you know, people, you know, young people grappling with their faith in the college years today. You do, you know, so you have the information, the knowledge. You can share one story, like you tell me one suicide story or attempt of a suicide, and now I'm like, oh, duh, that's my
Yep.
kid. You know, now all of
Right.
a sudden, like I'm thrown into how do we help every kid? Because that was me, that was my, you know, and so just know one story is all you need. I think sometimes we get caught up, especially in nonprofits, where we feel like those numbers, you know, we did throw out that Tim has helped 4,000 youth in the last 3 years. Like that's a great number to throw in, but we didn't start with that number. You know, it was like, oh, by the way, since Darion's story, like since he, you know, was a part of this 8 years ago, look at the impact that's happened and just the exponential growth that has happened in the years to come.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a temptation to be drawn to the quantity, and it's not that, it's the quality. If you can share just one story about like how you have seen what you're talking about doing work, and seeing that there's a problem, then you can do it. And I saw Barbara Rhodes like wrote in the question, and we can move on to the next spot. But she said, so if the story starts with your own, is that okay? I think so. I
Yeah.
think if you can share that story about how, like, there was a problem, or maybe you were a part of that problem, and you figured out how to overcome that, then absolutely. And then, so I would say, like, of course you can use your own story to begin with. As soon as you, in doing the work itself, you can share another story, I think that would be even better. So
Yeah.
just to
So
build onto that.
and it goes back to like Tim's talking about Darion, he's talking about the one, and then it moves into the, you know, thousands of other youth are just like that. So
Right.
Barbara, it started with you and then it moved into that, you know, helping others just like you that have been through the same situation. So really
Yeah.
good. All right. So moving on to team building. So we want to build on this, that it's like, it starts with this story because you don't have anything else. Okay. Like
Right.
you literally have, there's, you know, the programs and services that you offer, like maybe you're just getting started. Maybe you just have that anchor, this, you know, one thing that you got going on. But from here, we need to be able to multiply. And
Yeah.
this is where the team building concept, every board, like every nonprofit needs a board of directors.
Yep.
The staff members, we're talking about how do you get paid? So we want you to be on staff. We want
Yeah.
you to be your first staff member. And then you've got your volunteer team.
That's
So
right.
let's jump into Tim's first team member.
Yeah, that was so you guys heard me mention earlier that I am a co-founder. She actually doesn't even really like the title. She doesn't like bestowing upon herself that she's a co-founder, but she is. But this was uh the first person that I reached out to when I had this idea. Her name's Lily Blake. Lily and I couldn't be more like each other, and we couldn't be more opposite of one another at the same time. Um, for obvious reasons, we're, clearly biological brothers and sisters, but but here's what I knew when I started Restoration House. I knew what I was good at. If there's one maybe good leadership quality in me that I've learned throughout the years, is I know particularly what I'm not good at. And I think a good quality of a leader is surrounding themselves with people who are good at all the things that they're not good at. And there's a lot of things that I'm not good at. In fact, most things I'm not very good at doing. So it's critical to me that I have to surround myself with people who do all those things that I'm not good at, and put them in my circle. And Lily was the first one. So I am a high in the sky, ADD visionary person. I'm always dreaming about the next big thing that we can do, the next big program that we can start, the next big fundraising goal that we can accomplish. Um, and so what Lily was is the boots on the ground. She was that detail-minded, program-oriented person. All the things that I was not good at, she was really good at. And we work well because she is that number 2 for me. If I'm the visionary person, she's the one who's actually like the implementer. She's the one who's making things happen. She's the one who's making sure that those Darion stories continue to happen and multiply. And I tell people all this all the time. You don't have a nonprofit until you've convinced at least one other person to get as excited about what you're doing as you are. I mean, is that fair? Do I say I say that quite often, right, Mary? Mary
Yes.
knows the thing that I get more jazzed about. Mary gets jazzed about fundraising. I get jazzed about teams. I love talking about teams because nothing of what I've done, nothing of what God has allowed me to do over the last 10 years is because of Tim Needham. It's because of the people that I've put in place underneath me. They're the ones who are actually doing the work, and they should get all the credit.
Yeah. Okay. So, giving you a little action step, do you have somebody, not necessarily a staff member? Some of you do have staff members, but do you have that key volunteer, that key, whether it's another staff person, do you have someone else that you can lean on? Maybe it's a spouse, maybe
Yeah.
it's a board of director member, a volunteer who said, or somebody, a friend who said to you, you know what? You should really do this.
Yeah.
Like, you know how we need people in our lives that are going to be like, Tim, you got something here. Like, have you
Yeah.
ever thought about doing this as like an actual career, like actually starting a nonprofit and doing this and helping people? So who is that for you guys? Who is that encourager, that person who's by your side supporting this effort? And for some of you, you are just, this is an idea that hasn't even come to fruition yet. So it's okay if you don't have someone. But for those of you who are getting established and are starting to get this off the ground, do you have that person? And feel free to write their name in the chat. Uh,
Yeah.
and this goes nowhere. We won't go after anybody. So,
Yeah.
but feel free to share their name in the chat.
Once what I want to stress is once you have that person, that's where you start thinking about the rest of the team. I wouldn't go it alone. I would identify that one other person you just really trust and you really value and you really think gets the vibe of what you're trying to go with. And then you guys sit down and then you start doing what we're seeing right in front of us. We're seeing like this is the beginning of what the action plan is. And inside that action plan, that's where you're talking about, all right, who are we going to invite to be a part of this? Who's going to be on our board of directors? Who's going to be on our team? What kind of staff do we need? What kind of roles do we need to fill? What kind of volunteers are we looking for? But first step is identifying that other person who just gets the vibe that you're going with, and then you start to look at the action plan, which we're going to talk about in just a second.
Yeah. So we don't want to overwhelm you, but
Yeah.
I just want you like to be able to see kind of what Tim created at the get-go. This is a lot. We have other students of ours who are like, hey, it was easier just for us to do one page. You can Google online, you can see nonprofit business plans, you can see strategic, like usually what we call it in the nonprofit space is a strategic plan. But and usually we're looking at a year. Some will do 3, some will do 5, some will do 10, right? So it just all depends on your comfortable, like where you're at in that. But Tim created this years ago, right, Tim? Like
Yeah.
this was something you guys created when you first got started. We often use like a 10-year time frame, and then we kind of have an 8-year time frame for Tim because it was kind of like there was like a 2-year incubator
Yeah.
season where it was like it's happening, but like what are the logistics behind that happening? So that's very normal if you're in that season where you're like, I know I'm supposed to do this, but it hasn't really taken off or it's not taken shape yet.
Yeah.
But that's the season that you were in when you created this, correct?
This was 2 years of different iterations of what we thought the organization could be good at and ultimately landed on. So, I mean, we went through in those 2 years, we went from thinking that we needed to build a school to building a drop-in center to having full-time educators. and ultimately landing on something that was, totally different from the original idea. But what this business plan allowed us to do is to figure out, okay, what is the big problems here in St. Louis? What organizations are addressing these type of issues? Um, are there areas that they're not addressing, and how can we best do that? And so once we identified what those areas are, then we need to start thinking about, okay, what kind of programs need to exist in order for us to have this successful type of program? So then you're looking at, like, now you're talking about like budgets, you're talking about marketing, you're talking about fundraising strategies, but all that, you have to go through this, this thought process of what's out there, how's our demographic being served, and how can we fill a niche that nobody else is doing? Or if there is a niche out there and other people are doing it, how can we do it better? That's what the business plan allows you to do. And I will say this too, because when we originally created this, I thought that this was the thing that we pitched to other people. This is what we pitched to other people, like how to become a part of. In reality, what this is kind of your own pitch. This is what allows you to think through, okay, how am I going to raise money? How am I going to come up with a marketing strategy? How am I going to market this to other organizations? What kind of team members do I need? What is our mission and vision statement? This is an all-encompassing document that helps you really figure out who you are. Because if I know visionaries and founders as we're one thing, we're high in the sky and we're very like just not in the details. This helps us get down in the details enough to where we can cast that vision very effectively.
Yeah. And this is like just a core piece that on the strategy side, I find that if I come into an organization who's like, we need more money. Okay. You can about imagine the questions. And it's like, we just need more money. Fix it. Just give us more money. And I'm like, that's great. But if you actually don't know what you're doing, it makes it extremely difficult for me to raise money around it.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's really hard to be a six-figure nonprofit organization or greater without having really clear understanding of who you are and who you're not.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to use the billion-dollar nonprofit that I worked for, the American Cancer Society, a billion-dollar nonprofit. I'm just going to tell you, there are 200 forms of cancer. And when somebody famous gets one form of cancer, guess what they want? They want to chuck their money at this organization and say, you should now care about breast cancer. You should
Yeah.
now care about testicular cancer. Like I very clearly remember the seasons when these celebrities would come through and they would yank all of their money and they would try and run the organization through the mud because they wouldn't veer their attention onto that one form of cancer. And that organization was like, I'm sorry, we are the American Cancer Society for 200 forms of cancer, not one, 200. And so these branch off organizations did begin. And that's where you got Susan G. Komen and you've got these other organizations, totally fine, nothing wrong with that. And the reason why they started was so that they could put their energy on the one. But this
Yeah.
business plan and these ideas are what keep you focused
Right.
on, we don't do everything. Like we are, and that organization was focused on research, education, advocacy, and services for all forms of cancer. And so they had to stay true to that. And so that's the same thing for you, is that it's like, once you get that mission and that vision nailed down, then you can say, this is who we are, this is who we aren't. And donors are going to invest in you in greater sums because they know who you are.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're trying, oh, you like that? Okay, let's go do that. And it's just a distraction. And the last thing you want is for any donor to run your organization. You do not want, you do not want that to happen. Trust me, you do not want that to happen. You want your mission, your vision to drive your organization, not the whims and desires of one very high level donor.
The point of the plan is to answer all the questions: who you are, the who's, what's, when's, where's, and why's.
Yeah.
of what your organization is, and once you've thought through that, you never have to think through it again, because you've established what the foundation of what your organization is. And I'd be curious, like, if you guys want to write in the comment section too. So just the why. That's the most important thing you do, is the why. Mary, because you've said this 1,000 times. You probably actually said this more times than I do. Like, why does Restoration House exist? 2 words: end homelessness. Well, and 3 words: end youth homelessness. That's why we exist. If we had to sum it up in a very brief statement, that's what we do. We end youth homelessness. So I'd be curious to see, like, in the comment section too, if you guys can summarize why do you guys need to exist?
Mhm. Yeah. Care for pastors. Yeah. Good, Jesse. Look at, he just dumped that out real quick. He's like, I got this one.
And see, so once you have thought through you thought about the who's, the what's, the when's, the where's, and the why's you exist, why you need to exist. You've got that plan. You've established who your board of directors needs to be. You have you have a team that you want to identify and get connected and get involved. Once you have all of that, now you're ready to start talking about Mary's favorite part, and that is raising funds.
The
But let
cash.
me just say, you cannot, if you're gonna you cannot do that until you have the plan.
Yeah.
You got to have, like, another person along there with you, and then you have the plan. And if you do it in that order, fundraising is going to be so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I realize is that, and you guys have probably seen this, if you've ever met somebody who's fairly wealthy, like somebody who has, like, maybe they've run a business and they're just very savvy. Maybe they're good with investments. Maybe they just, I don't, they just get it. They can take one look at your organization and they can either give you a head nod yes or a head nod no, because they can smell in about 2 seconds whether or not you've done any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So, and it seems so like, oh, like nobody sees what I'm doing. Like nobody was there praising you, Tim, when you were knocking out that business plan. And nobody was saying, good job, Tim, when you were like laboring over how to get Lily on your team and how to like keep her on your team when she quit and then she came back again. Right. Like it's like, and nobody understood the broken heartedness that you had over Darion. So
Yeah.
it's like all of that stuff that you're doing behind the scenes is building the case for support. It's
Yeah.
building up the stories, it's building up the testimonials, it's building up the credibility of your organization. And some people, I'm just going to let you know, Tim, when you first got started, there were people that chucked some really nice money your way.
Oh,
Like
for sure.
you got a $10,000 gift very quickly in your organization
Yeah.
because they saw this promise of what was possible with this organization. And so you're going to see people who are going to give donations just because they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're doing good work and I want to be one of the first ones to invest in what you're doing." So I'm
Mhm.
not going to tell you you got to have all this in place before you're going to get that first gift. I'm not going to tell you that because people will give. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of what we said with the storytelling. Tell the stories. I don't care who you're talking to. You have that Darion story in your back pocket and you are ready to drop that Darion story whenever you need to, right? Like you're like, oh, you do what? Oh, you're helping who? And you're like, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you understand what's actually happening in our community. And I don't
Yeah.
know, Tim, you did that with me a lot. Like, and it wasn't like Tim was giving me this formal story and it was just a very natural conversation. I was leaning in. I was interested about the homeless youth in our community. Why do they need you? Why does your organization even have to exist? And so people are going to do that with you guys. And you just have to be ready with the story and then allow them the opportunity to be a part of it. Some people are going to drop a check on you. I will tell you, I was at a networking event for the Chamber of Commerce. This was early in my fundraising days. And a gentleman asked me what I did. I was working for Special Olympics at the time. And he said, what are you raising funds for right now? I said, I'm raising funds for some basketball uniforms for our Special Olympics team. He goes, how much is it going to cost? And I said, about $20 a uniform. And he goes, how many kids you got? And next thing I know, he's like, do you got a pen? And I'm like, I mean, I didn't. And I'm like scrambling. And he wrote me $1,000 check.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just standing in the middle of this networking thing and he just busts out his checkbook. Now, you guys know what year this is because where nobody's holding on to checkbooks anymore. But I mean, like a Venmo, jumping on your website immediately and making that donation, that is just very normal. And I just want to make sure that you guys can see that it's like becoming a six-figure organization is going to take the intentions that we're talking about here, but to get off the ground and to get like feeling a little bit more comfortable, you're going to start to see people leaning in on your story and saying, well, how can I be a part of that, and wanting to invest in it. So,
Yeah.
all right.
If you
So
just want to see a really good listen to a really good example of that, listen to this week's current podcast, because we have Mark and Adina Delaney on there, and we share about how we were in a workshop recently, and her husband was sharing the vision of why they do what they do, and he did such a good job of it that by the end of his spiel that he gave, we were all sitting on the edge of our seats. Everybody in the room was sitting on the edge of their seats. Now, mind you, we're nonprofit entrepreneurs ourselves. We're trying to raise money, but we were all on the edge of our seats trying to figure out, when is he going to ask us for money? Because we want to give it to him right now. You know,
yeah. Yeah. And that's the whole thing is that what we were pushing him towards was the fact that it's like, you got to go one step forward and be like, would you like to be a part of it?
yeah,
And just say, like, if you'd like to get plugged in, we'd love for you to consider giving. So
yeah,
it's as simple as that. Yeah. Thank you, Aaron, for posting the link to the podcast in there. You guys can check those out. I just wanted to share with you guys this, and we're going to go through this last step real fast and dive into some ways that we can work together. But I want you to see this list of possible revenue streams. I shared this at our workshop just a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was helpful for you guys to see. And I do want you to be overwhelmed. Okay. Like my intention of putting this all on one screen is because I want you to be overwhelmed. There are so many ways that you can raise money. And this is just a list of ideas. And behind every idea is more, like online donations, Facebook fundraisers, text to give, Giving Tuesday. I could have listed 20 other online donation options, right? But I want you to see that as an organization, you don't need to do everything, nor should you. And so every time a volunteer or somebody says, hey, have you ever thought about raising funds like this? Or have you ever thought about doing this? It's so easy to be overwhelmed by the fundraising side, to be like, I can't put on an event, and I can't run grants, and I can't do corporate sponsorships, and I've got matching gifts. And then there's these cause related, programs I got to set up. You're going to be so overwhelmed. And so my challenge to you is to actually choose 3 different revenue streams. You guys probably caught, or maybe you did or didn't catch, a previous webinar that Tim and I had done on diversifying your funds. And I challenged you guys that I was like, you have to diversify your funds. We have learned in the last 4 years, if anybody knows what happened on March 2020, and all of these organizations were running those fundraising events, and that's just one of these bullets over here, special events. Okay. They had all their money in that one bucket, and all of a sudden we're not hanging out together face to face. And so these events and all these things were just like, oh my gosh, now how do we come up with our money? Every large scale nonprofit has diversified their funds enough to where if one thing tanks, they are totally fine. Nothing's going to destroy their organization. It's what creates sustainability year after year after year. Okay. So any startup nonprofit does not need to do these. Okay. And I'm going to give you permission to say no. I'm going to give you permission to say no to people who say, hey, have you ever thought about this? But what I do want you to know is that it's like, when somebody does say, have you ever thought about doing this or doing that? And you're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for that recommendation. Would you be interested in getting involved? And you can easily turn that one thing into, hey, that idea into giving them the ability to go raise those funds. You don't need me, the director, to hold your hand through it. That's called a third party fundraising event. It's the third one from the bottom over here, third party fundraising.
yeah,
Let somebody else run, like a company wants to do something for you. Fantastic. Go run that fundraiser and then come bring me a cardboard check.
Yeah.
and we will take a picture together and recognize your great efforts.
It is such like an amazing feeling when you have people raising money and you don't have to do a darn thing for it. You just got to sit back and you got to shake hands and give hugs and smile and take that check. It's a great feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so I just want to challenge you to do three. My top two that I'm going to recommend to you are going to be at the top of these two lists. Okay. So individual donations on the left, and I got in-kind donations on the right.
Yeah.
Individual donations, you can build relationships with people. And those
Right.
relationships, especially when you're talking about annual gifts or monthly gifts, there is like a 90% success rate on monthly donations.
Yeah.
People that will give month after month after month to your organization. But I will say a lot of organizations went to like these one-off, like, oh, we're going to do sponsorships or we're going to do annual gifts. And it's fine to get that one gift, but it's so much work to get it back every single year. So I just want to highly encourage you guys to look at that individual giving as like, how do we get people to give a single gift and then turn it into a recurring gift? And
Yeah.
keep them with you month after month, year after year, to where they're a part of your nonprofit family. They're sustainers. They're the ones that are keeping your doors open every year, and that allows you to build and continue to add more donors while retaining the other ones. So I'm going to encourage you on the individual donations, and then the in-kind donations is just a fancy word for free stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. When somebody gives you free stuff, like, hey, did you need whatever, some gift certificates for your auction? Do
That's right.
you need, some napkins at your event? Or, oh, you need some hotel stays for the people who are coming to speak at your gathering? Okay,
Yep.
great. But yeah, Tim is the expert at in-kind donations. All of the people who were with us at our workshop 2 weeks ago, we were recipients of it. We were in a building that was 100% donated to Tim's organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just say, so even the spot where we're at now, where we run our and function our drop-in center, we don't pay for it. In fact, well, I take back, we pay like 2/3 of the utilities. And but we actually do that, kind of voluntarily, but we don't pay anything for it because we are a community partnership. We've created a trade and barter kind of thing. We have a need that the owner of that building had, and we could provide that solution. They had the need, we had the solution. And so I'm going to tell you, like, early on, when it comes to many of the things that you guys are in need of, there are oftentimes people who are willing to give of their time, like it says in here, as doing it pro bono. But there's so many goods and resources out there that are free and available. I'm kind of notorious on my team. People know, like, when we need to get something, they say, "Can we go out and buy this?" And I'll tell them, "Nope, not until we figure out whether there's somebody who wants to give it to us first." Because there's almost always somebody out there who's either willing to provide that service for you, or is willing to pay for that herself. We're in the middle, in the process of a building expansion in our spot, and I am bound and determined to find somebody who will do all the architectural and engineering drawings, pro bono for us.
Yep.
And I'm going to keep searching until we find somebody. Now, will we eventually be willing to do it if we have to? Sure, but I'm going to exhaust every opportunity I have to see whether it can be filled before I spend money on it. I did
Yep.
see Sarah ask the question: can you receive donations, especially somewhat bigger donations like $1,000 plus? Do you typically take a check photo with that person and share it on your socials? What I would say is, it's certainly it's okay to ask, and if they're willing, if you feel like you know them well enough to know that they wouldn't mind doing something like that, and you can post it on socials, um if they're okay with it, yes. But I have found that oftentimes, like, people with bigger donations, they don't like a lot of credit. They like to just write the check and be done. So you have to know the person really well and see what their objectives are before you can answer that question.
Yeah. And this honestly is a case by case basis, because like if I'm at, Chrysler dealership, whatever, and they just have been collecting funds at the desk, or every car that this was something that they did at the American Cancer Study, every car they sold, they gave, $1,000 from every car to the organization. Well, you better believe they wanted that check in front of their
Absolutely.
car, handing it over. They put the ribbon on on the check, and it was all pretty and looked very professional. They wanted that for their marketing benefits. But I would say for those of you who are working with organizations that aren't looking for the marketing, they aren't looking for the accolades, they're probably not going to want to do something like that, especially at that level. But once you get a little bit higher, absolutely. And just know, if it's a third party event, yes, like they have their staff, let's take a picture, let's do the presentation, and go from there. But yeah, case by case on that.
And
So,
you
all
can
right.
talk to people and say like, like, hey, you can ask them. Because I actually do try to have those conversations with people as much as I can, because there is sometimes this mindset people say, "Oh, I don't want any credit." And if that's their mindset, I try to work to help them change that mindset, because um giving encourages other giving. So if
Absolutely.
other people are seeing that you're giving and you can share that with other people, that will incline more people to give. So as
Mhm.
best you can, in every situation is different. If you can get to that point, that's great. But what Mary said is right, and I would say this too. It's on a case by case basis. You just have to know what the heart and the intent behind the person is.
Yeah. And Barbara, really great comment here. Do you want recognition on our social media? It's just an easy question. And if they say, no, that's okay, or, oh, that'd be great, our team would love to do that. So it's better. I'm always like, always gear on the side of caution, but you don't want to assume anything for somebody else. So really
Yeah.
good. Okay. So I'm just going to encourage you here to choose 3 revenue streams, 3 areas that you're going to pursue funding from. And if you're an older organization, if you're more experienced, then that list is going to be longer. But I would just start off with those 3, is like, where do I want to see our funding come in from? And some of you, grants may be a great option for you for funding.
Yeah.
Tim chose not to take grants for his organizations just because it restricted him on what he could do.
Yeah.
But for some of you, grants may be a great option.
And
So
I chose to do them, but in hindsight, I've learned along the way too. Grant writers typically want an organization who has a little bit of meat behind their belt. They've got a little bit of experience. So if you're a brand new organization, it is going to be harder. It's going to be more challenging for you to be approved for grants early on. Now, once you've been around for a year, 2, 3 years, and you've got some stories behind your organization, becomes much easier.
yeah, really good. Okay, I just want to share, this is a little bit of like the layout is difficult to see, but I just want you to see Tim's case document. So it's a total of 8 pages. So the cover here on the left, 30, 60, 90 campaign, there's a letter, there's the mission, the vision of the organization. You can see that picture we pulled of Darion from this document. There's a couple more testimonials on here. Then he's got, this page is kind of cut in half, but there's 2 additional pages about the funding. It gives the breakdown of, hey, here are the 3 revenue sources. I believe he has 3 here on monthly,
Yep.
annual. Yep. And then do that third party fundraiser for us. It's hard to see, but the whole point is I just want you to see what it looks like to actually have a presentation put together. But after you've grabbed the stories, after you've grabbed the financials, you got the
Plan.
information that you've, pulled through, your team is intact. So it allows you then to put a document like this together. Bob, who's on the call here, I worked with him on creating his, and I mean, he's got years of experience to pull together, but it's beautiful. Once you can like get all the ideas, get all the things out of your head and get it down on paper, now you've got a really solid document that you can use to share with your volunteers and share with donors. So now we can start to spread the ideas, and here's how you can give to our organization. So I know we don't have a ton of time to go through this, obviously. This is why we work with organizations, to walk with them through this, but the whole intention is that we want to multiply.
Yeah.
Like you are one person. So a lot of times when people are like, oh, like I have this vision of our organization being, you know, in several cities or being in different parts of the country or internationally. And the only way for that to happen is for you to do it well where you're at. So you have to start with that beta location, like start where you are, start with the minimum viable product with what you
Right.
have. And then you can start to add team members. You can add layers onto your work. And now your story is being multiplied. And I just want to share with, you know, specifically around Tim's organization. I was on, you know, on Facebook, looking at my Facebook community page you know, I'm in St. Louis, live in Dogtown, if you know the area. It's very historic. And people are talking about seeing a homeless youth sitting outside on the street. And the post comes up on the Facebook group and they're just like, what are we going to do? Who can, you know, what can we do to help this kid? Da, da, da. And the next thing I know is somebody's popping up Restoration House on the feed. It was like, hey, this organization will help that kid. You know, here's their information. Here's their website. You can send them. And I'm like, and I copied and screenshotted that and sent it to Tim. And I was like, Tim, I'm like, yes. And then I'm sitting in my living room and I'm watching TV and up comes the news. And all of a sudden here's Tim and Lily up on the news and they're talking about helping youth. And, you know, it was, I think, you know, I think it was February. So it was, you know, that kind of, you know, they were just talking about, you know, how are we helping the Black community? And so anyways, it was just really incredible that the multiplication of it starts off with you doing it alone.
Yeah.
And then it starts to multiply into, but we all know that if we tell the wrong story, if we don't have the clear vision, if we don't have the clear mission, the story will still spread. And then all of a sudden you can't rein it back in.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where you have a problem. So we want to make sure that you do the work up front so that you can really build a sustainable 6-figure nonprofit and get paid in doing that.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important. So here's just some last thoughts, and then we'll give you an opportunity to work with us, and then we'll wrap from there. But the 3 things I just want you to see that every nonprofit needs. Okay. So we've been sharing with you our start process. I think every step of that, I hope you guys have taken something from that where you're like, oh, I'm missing this, or I could work on this piece. But the 3 things every nonprofit entrepreneur needs is these 3 things. You need the information, hands down. Many of you guys are like, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know how to start a nonprofit. I've never started a nonprofit. So information is absolutely important. Like what Tim and I have been sharing with you guys is like, hey, here are some really strategic things that you can do to build out a successful, sustainable 6-figure nonprofit. Information. But number 2 is coaching and mentorship. And I don't know about you, but I have never been very good at doing anything new without having somebody who's already done it ahead of me.
That's right.
So having that coach or that mentor who's ahead of me, number 2, and number 3, having a community.
Yeah.
You know, having people around you who are like-minded, who are doing similar work makes all the difference. And I'm going to be real honest. You can use ChatGPT, you can Google information. Number 1, there is information everywhere, anywhere. I was like, it's information overload. And so you're not going to miss out on not having information. But the 2 things that I do want to challenge you on today is the coaching and the community, because it's so easy to like go down this path and feel overwhelmed and exhausted from the idea of running a nonprofit when you don't have somebody who can guide you. So,
what Mary hasn't mentioned up until this point, so she mentioned Emily Hauser, and that was her first client. But I think, right, I'm the second, right?
yes.
Like the second.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Emily Hauser came along first. She beat me to Mary, so I didn't get to be first there. But what I've told people for many years is there's a couple of critical stepping stones.
Yeah. Milestones.
Milestones. There we go. That's that word.
Gotcha.
That Restoration House had. The first one that we ever did was we brought on a coach. We brought on a fundraising coach. And so that person for us was Mary. Ironically, the next big thing that I did for myself as the executive director was, and the starter of this new nonprofit was, I put myself in community. And ironically, that person who was a big part of that community for me was Emily Hauser. Because what it allowed me to do was to see somebody who was just a tad bit farther along than I was. And also in that group, there were people who were at the same level that I was. So they were more of like the anchor, the people who I was locking arms with. And then eventually, the cool part is we started putting people on the team who weren't as far along as I was now, and so I was able to pour into them as well. So that's what community does for you, though, is it puts you around people who are of like mind, who are also visionaries, who are also nonprofit entrepreneurs, and you grow with one another. You cry with one another. You laugh with one another. You celebrate each other's successes. You champion when somebody gets a $25,000 check, or a $100,000 check, and you encourage one another when somebody says, "You know what? I know my budget last year was 75,000, but I'm going for $250,000 in next year's budget because I need it to be able to do the work that we're going to do. So we're going to put together that plan." That's what community does for you. And
So
you can build a nonprofit without it. I will say it can be done, but you're going to go through a lot more challenges, headaches, mistakes along the way, compared to the person who puts themselves in a coaching environment, and an accountability environment, and in a community environment.
yeah. And it's so lonely. Oh,
It's lon it's incredibly lonely, and
yeah.
you don't need to go through that. You don't need
Yeah.
to feel that way.
Yeah. So we just want to take a few minutes and share with you some ways that we could partner together. But I would love to know if you guys are open to hearing about how we can help you start and grow your nonprofit, and help you transform more lives. So if you're up for that, can I get a yes in the chat? Yay. Okay, cool. Love that. Thank you guys. Okay, so a couple years ago, Tim and I, well, actually, it's probably been 3 or 4 at this point. Tim kind of was like, "Mary, I really want to help nonprofits get started." And he's like, he goes, "Do you think this is a good idea?" And I'm like, "Tim, I think it's a great idea. Like, yes, you need to do this." And after a few years had passed and nothing had happened, God started pressing it on my heart to want to pursue it as well. And so Tim and I locked arms about a year and a
Right.
half ago. And we said, I think we need to start an academy for startup and growing nonprofits. I've been doing, I said I've been doing this for 10 years. Over the course of the last 8 years, I've been helping missionaries raise money. And I love that. But this is typically the next stage. When people have been running and helping in a service oriented space, they tend to then be like, you know what, I think I might be able to actually do this on my own and start a nonprofit. And so this is really it's an online coaching program to help you start and grow your nonprofit from the ground up. And it's really like the people that it's for is for the nonprofit entrepreneur like you who wants to start and grow your nonprofit and get paid. All right. It's if you want to be fully resourced for the work you've been called to do, you're willing to develop your skills as a communicator, fundraiser, and leader. You recognize times are changing, and you want you want experienced coaches to guide you, and it's time to grow, and you're willing to invest in yourself so you can pour into others. And so the key things that we do inside of the academy is, one, we have a course that goes through all 5 of these steps that we talked about today. So we go into the storytelling, we talk about the mission, the vision, the founder's story. We get into all 5 of them that we talk through, but much more in depth, and give you some really key action items to get through that. You have the templates. Tim actually had his bookkeeper put together a budget where you can just dump in your own numbers, and it's just all
Right.
set up and turnkey for you. We've got volunteer job descriptions, my support letters that I teach, case documents like the one you saw of Tim's, but we have over, I think I'm getting close to 20 at this point of samples of those, sample strategic plan and more. And then you have access to experts like Tim and James, one of our other coaches who runs a 7-figure nonprofit. We've got the podcast episode guests that we've had. A lot of them have provided expert knowledge and information for us. So we have a great team to help you guys. And then we do these calls twice a month. So twice a month, we're on live coaching calls with you and a team where you guys get to do life together. And you have access to a private Nonprofit Academy online community to get feedback from each other, learn from others, and grow your network. I know Adina already posted in here about, just the support that she's received and how she's doubled her organization, her funding just in the last few months, which is incredible, Adina. I didn't even know that. So, it's cool because you take an idea and you just never know what's going to come from it. And so I have my 7-step fundraising freedom course in there. And then I also have my audiobook, so you guys get access to that. But this is Deira. Deira was on our podcast a few episodes back, but she said she stalked me for a couple of years, which is great. I don't mind that at all. Because we've done a lot of podcast episodes, and I do these webinar trainings so that you guys can start to implement the ideas. And so she said, I silently, I stalked Mary for a couple of years. I silently did what she was teaching and was able to raise the funds to join the Academy. It's been really cool to know that I'm not the only one who's trying to figure this out. How many people have friends who are starting up a nonprofit because that's what God told them to do? It's been so great to listen to their stories and have Mary and Tim's templates to go off of. That's huge for me. I don't have time to start from scratch. So to be able to copy and repurpose the resources and make them my own has been invaluable. And so Indira has 2 buildings that were donated to them. I mean, she quickly grew within 2 years. It was like this organization just exponentially grew. So it was like, she was like holding on for dear life, like help, like I just need to know that I'm not screwing up. And when
They
things
have,
move fast, it's easy to get overwhelmed. So she had a great team with our crew to come alongside her.
yeah, they have only been in existence for just a couple of years. I
Yeah.
mean, and they're exploding with growth. Yeah.
Yeah. And then this is Patrick, Adina, and the rest of the crew. They're in with Patrick and his team. And he said his goal this year is to raise $250,000, so 250,000, a goal I never thought I would be asking for, but I've used Mary's strategies. And the more I tell my story, the more people want to give. Huh, imagine that.
Imagine that,
I
telling a
mean,
story.
exactly. And so many people don't realize how powerful your stories are when they're really condensed and tightened into one story, not 20.
Yeah,
So,
right.
and then
One good story. That's all you need.
yes. And then here's Adina and Mark. So you guys get to see Adina's face here. But Mark and Adina, like we said, they were on our podcast this week. And this is what Mark had shared. He said, on Friday mornings at my house, when I know Adina is on the Nonprofit Academy call, I'm doing flips because I know how desperate I am to see people be set free and know their purpose. It's overwhelming sometimes, the goals and dreams we have. When I see that call on the calendar, I know that there is this little army of people that are fighting and working to make this thing be better and to help us. There are things happening, iron sharpening iron. There's a plan, a strategy, there's support. And
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I think that that's where so many people find themselves, that they're like, the dreams and goals are so overwhelming. And then there's all these people that are waiting to be served. And it's like, and then you don't have the money. So it just feels like, oh my gosh, like the sky's falling. What do I do first? Do I do this? Do I do that? And it just feels very chaotic. And what Tim and I do is we really calm all the noise from your head. The goal is that we come down off of all the noise that is trying to distract you and just say, don't worry about that right now.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that right now. Like, we need to focus on, this is your next step so that
Right.
you can actually make steps forward and see progress without being distracted with all the ideas. Although wonderful, I love a good volunteer. They got lots of ideas, but sometimes they can be a distraction because you want to please them.
Oh.
And instead you can say, you know what? My coach told me that this was really the direction we need to move in right now. And I love it. And we're not going to disregard the idea because I think we should do it. We just need to hold off. Like maybe we can do it in the next 6 months or maybe in the next year. So let's hold on to the idea and come back to it. So anyway, so I want to go back to this testimonial at the beginning. My client who talked about, after 13 years, I finally get to run my nonprofit full time. I just want to highlight the fact that it's like, be intentional about what you want. You know, what is it that you want? Is it that you want to work full time? Is it that you want to run a 6-figure nonprofit? Is it that you want to change lives? What is it that you want, and create clarity around that? And then let's create a plan to make sure that you get to that. Because I don't think that any of the nonprofits that are in the position that they're in that are doing really well got there on accident. Okay.
Yeah.
None of these stories that we talked about, they didn't just happen. They clearly had a strategy, just like Tim and I have shared. There's a clear strategy. And I just want to highlight what it really costs for you to not join in on a group like ours, or to take it to the next step. And just really clear that there's a difference between being drained versus spent. And, draining hours to try and figure out what to say or what to write, or draining hours trying to create your job descriptions and support letters, frustration in coming up with strategies to grow your organization and build your staff and volunteer team, frustration because you feel like you're burning bridges relationally, frustration because you've taken your organization as far as you know how to take it and you're not sure what to do next. And then ultimately being in the same place next year because you haven't developed the key skills necessary for these changing times. And this last one is the heartbreaker. Like this is the one that just absolutely makes me sick, because I cannot handle seeing the organizations that I've talked to year after year and just being like, what's new? What's going on? What happened? And it's like nothing. It was just it just froze in time because they just did not take the steps forward. They just didn't have the support system, to be honest. This is hard work, and we're not going to sugarcoat it. So, but regardless, we just encourage you to invest those frustrating hours with us instead. And so when we'll guide you through the strategies we talked about step by step and more. And this is ultimately why I do the work that I do. This is my why. I do not want you to do this alone. It's lonely. I have fundraised for over 2 decades. I know how lonely it is when you feel the weight of the world on your shoulders to try and bring in the funds. And you're like, am I making the right decision? Am I doing the right things? And when you do feel alone, it's not okay. And it doesn't have to be that way. So that's why Tim and I are here. And that's why we're doing this, because your mission matters.
That's right.
Yeah. So on that note, how do you guys get plugged in? We're not like, hey, sign up here right now. Our goal really is to have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
We want to hear about your ideas. We want to hear about your nonprofit. We want to hear about what you guys are dreaming about, what you want to do with your organization. Do you want it to be a 6-figure? Do you want it to be a 7-figure? Maybe you just want to get something off the ground and do a project. That's okay. So we do have an application process. So how this is going to work is you just jump on the website, type in, there's I think 10 questions. It's just a handful of questions to find out more about your organization. And then our assistant, Erin, who's on the call here, she's going to get you scheduled for a call with Tim and I. We're going to talk with you through your organization, and then we'll give you all the details for what this looks like. We open up these groups only a couple times a year. And so we are very intentional about keeping the groups very small. The group that we have right now, I believe we're at less than 10. Well, I think we're at 10 for that group. Now that we've merged our crew together, I mean, it's just absolutely incredible, the stories. And I've shared obviously some of them here with you already today. But the goal here is just to really help you guys navigate this and walk with you through it, help coach, mentor, and give you a community to do that. So do you guys have any questions, anything that came out of today's conversation that you want us to address before we let you go? Is there a cost? Yes, Emily, there is a cost to being a part of the group. And we do have a variety of different options. And here's the thing about, we don't post the fees on the webinar here today, because we have too many people. This is the fun part about the scarcity poverty mindset that creeps into our nonprofit sector, is that it's easy to immediately say, oh, I can't afford that. We haven't even raised any money yet for this organization. How can we do this? And so let's have a conversation, even see if this is a good next step, and then we'll give you some resources to help you get there. But yes, there is a fee to being a part of the Nonprofit Academy, because here's what I've learned. I've done a lot of things for free. And when I've given things for free, people don't seem to have any skin in the game. And I think that when it comes to something as big as this, I think it's worth the investment. it's worth having the right team around you and to have it part of your budget so that you know, hey, I've got a team, we've invested in this. Our board knows that these are professionals who are doing this work. And it's not just oh, my friends, Tim and Mary are helping me with this organization. It really gives you some fuel for the fire to get it going. So I will say anytime that I do coaching, hands, like this was a thing that I, from the get-go, was that I will not like, I will encourage you not to work with me if I cannot 10x your money. I mean, if I cannot 10x your money, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. So that is my absolute, I'm like, I don't even want to have a like, I don't like feel like it's necessary to pull a conversation together. If I can't, I'm just going to encourage you to go listen to our podcast, go check out the free resources that we have available, because like, I want to, when we're working together, I want to make sure that you're seeing progress and you're actually seeing those funds come in. So, yeah.
When it comes, so I saw one of the questions asked, like, how do we find a good blank template for a business plan? I run a ministry, but haven't created a business plan. You can, Google is always your good friend to write a good business plan. You can do it that way. But I'll tell you what, so if any of you guys want to get access to that, my email should be on the website, I think, right?
Yep.
So
Yep. It's just Tim at
yeah.
startandgrowyournonprofit.com.
Oh yeah. I should have just said that. Yeah.
It's
You can click on
added
that.
Tim.
Tim at, yeah. And Aaron can put it in the notes here. Shoot me an email and I'd be happy to send you a copy of the ones that I've got. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the great thing about our academy is that we do share
Yeah.
resources. So
Right.
that was the thing, like Adina on here, she found a template and she decided to go with a 1-page format, and it works great for her, so, but some like the longer format like Tim has created. I think it's a personal preference on what you like to do, what motivates you to keep going. So that's
Yeah.
good.
But I
And
will
then
say one thing I will say is, even with the stuff that I've got and we created, it took a long time to work on. And in hindsight, it doesn't need to take that long. That's why you need like a good coach, because we can talk you through that. We can walk you through every part of that, like that plan. Yeah.
so good. All right, let me answer Bill's question and then we'll wrap. So Bill said, how difficult is a 501c3? Is that the only route to go? And Bill, honestly, it's not the only route to go. And a lot of organizations, they will start off under a fiscal sponsorship, which just means another 501c3 kind of adopts them for a season. So there's lots. I actually was on a call this morning giving a whole slew of ways that somebody can become a 501c3. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, we have to go fill out the paperwork today. But if your vision is, and I'm just going to be really clear, if your vision is to actually run a full-fledged organization, receipt your donors, have everything under your nonprofit umbrella, you do want to go through the process of setting up a 501c3. We have plenty of students that have come through our program who did not have their 501c3s when they started. It actually was a benefit to them that they didn't, because Tim was able to be like, hey, I got a guy. And I think sometimes we overspend because we think we need an attorney and we need, a lot of different things when like the government's not coming after you. Okay. I think we get worried when the government's involved, but the form, and it's actually not as complicated as you might think. So, but that's something that, Tim and I can hold your hand, and it just gives you a piece that, hey, I'm working with people who've done this and they know what to expect. So it's the same thing with like, can I receipt my donors if I don't have my 501c3? Tim and I will work with you through all those details. So I know there's a ton of questions that you probably haven't even thought to ask. And that's why this academy exists. Many times when we talk to people, we say, you probably don't know what you don't know. It really is like, I'm probably going to stick my foot in my mouth, or I'm going to drop into a pothole, somewhere along the line, because I just don't know. And that's really, Tim did it. I mean, I've done it in my fundraising, which is why we're like, hey, can we help you so that you don't have to go through the pain and the frustration and the heartache? I have had to talk Tim off of a cliff on a board member, and it probably will help Tim talk some of you guys off the ledge with your board members, and working with volunteers, like this is a whole different undertaking, especially if you're used to the business side or even just individual ministry kind of work. But
Yeah.
anyways,
You did, so somebody did say, or Bill said, he can start through an existing church. Absolutely. So you
mhm.
can start just like it's just a ministry within the church too, but you can also start the organization, like actually create a full-fledged organization under the umbrella of a church as well. So, in fact, we did that with our organization. In the first year that we were in existence, it's called a DBA, or doing business as. We DBA'd Restoration House under the leadership of our home church, with the understanding that once we were able to complete all the paperwork and establish our own entity, we became our own separate 501(c)(3). So that's a great question. And yes, you can do that.
Yeah, really good. Hey, Nikki, I'm not sure why we're having issues with your the form, but we'll just I have your information, so we'll connect. I'll find you. But and we'll make sure that we send out the link and all the details in our follow-up email to you guys. So I know Tim and I are both like passionate about helping you guys through the journey wherever you're at. Our intention is never to make you move faster than you're called to move. So that's the whole thing is like for people who are like, I'm ready to go. I'm excited. I'm fired up. Like this is the season. I'm ready for it. Like that's what we're looking for. And if you're like in the early stages of I'm learning, I'm trying to figure it out, that's okay too. And we'd love to help you through that and give you some resources to walk through it. So on that note, we need to wrap up today's conversation, let you go back to work, possibly in a day job, but also help you guys get some work done on creating this nonprofit if that's the vision you have. So,
Okay.
Tim, any last thoughts?
Nope. I hope you guys shoot us a message, set up a discovery call. We would love to chat with you wherever you are in the process. Even if, so I saw a couple of people say they're not a nonprofit yet and they don't have a budget. Great. We want to help you. That's what we exist for. We're here to help you think through all those strategies. So go to the website, sign up for a discovery call, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sounds great. All right, guys. Well, we will see you, and be sure to check out the podcast if you haven't yet. Start and Grow Your Nonprofit podcast, and love to continue to keep the conversation going. So we will see you all very soon. Let's go change the world one
One
nonprofit
nonprofit at a
at a
time.
time. Okay, we'll see you guys soon. Bye.